This episode of the Danger Close podcast is brought to you by Cry Havoc. From New York Times #1 best-selling author, Jack Carr. Cry Havoc, a Tom Reese thriller. Order now.
And the Americans are going, my God, that guy's a Viet Cong, standing right there. They get into a firefight. It caused a big international problem. The Russians complained to the International Control Commission. Cambodia is neutral. We're supposed to stay away from Cambodia. So Zumwalt gets leaned on from Washington. What are you doing? What are you letting your guys doing all this crazy stuff? Zumwalt calls Mike Bernique back to Saigon. Everybody thinks he's going to get court-martialed. You know what I mean? Zumwalt listens to him, and he says, I'm giving you a squadron of swift boats. Now we're going to start patrolling the entire Cambodian border because that's where they're bringing the weapons in. Hey, good morning, Jack.
Good morning. How are you?
Very well. Thanks for having me.
Oh my gosh, I've been so looking forward to this. Thank you so much for taking the time.
My pleasure.
I don't think I'm going to get to all these questions. I have so much I want to discuss with you. And then I have the book right here. Yeah, are you in San Diego right now?
Yeah, I live in the village of La Jolla. Oh. Thank goodness we have dumpsters driving around here and everything. And I think our daily one just finished. So
nice. Well,
rattling and banging.
Oh, no, no worries at all. And you have the Warwick's bookstore right there down the road from you.
Yes, we do. We do.
I love that bookstore. So great.
Yeah.
Hopefully get back there for one of these future book tours.
Have you presented there with your books?
I have. I think it's been since 2019, though, I believe. So my second book, I passed through there. Try to switch it up a little bit with each book tour. A couple staples and then a few new ones each time. But I definitely need to get back to La Jolla. I have such great memories of going up to La Jolla with my wife when I was in the SEAL teams, and dinners and the beach and swimming and kayaking and all that. So it's a beautiful place.
Actually, there's another bookstore, D.G. Wills. I don't know if you stopped in there at all.
No.
Dennis Wills he's a good pal. He's up maybe 4 or 5 blocks uphill from Warwick's, but it's he started a bookstore for specialty books, first editions, and all that sort of thing. And he was very interesting. He's kind of my age. He was a graduate student at Columbia in Russian studies when he got drafted. And so they pulled him out and seconded him to NSA because he spoke Russian and everything, sent him to Germany. And he'd do stuff like listen to Brezhnev's remote phone calls from his car and things like that. Anyway, so we've had great stories together, and that's where I opened when I published the NILO book. That's where I had my little entry thing.
Oh, no kidding! We'll have to stop by there. I have some questions for him already. That's fascinating.
Yeah. Oh, he's a really good guy. I think you'd really like him.
Oh, that's fantastic. I'm definitely going to look him up, and hopefully we can meet up in person when I'm out there as well. It'd be great to sit down with you and pick your brain a little more about some of these things.
I would love to.
Oh, amazing. And today is April 29th when we're recording this, which is the day that the official evacuation order went out in Saigon in 1975. There's that photo of the Huey on the roof of what people thought was the embassy, but was really the Pittman Apartments, CIA safe house, with one of the pilots reaching down on that whole line of refugees. And then I think the last Americans got out the next day on April 30th. So that's the day we're recording all of this, and I want to kind of finish up with your thoughts on that at the end. But I think I want to start off before I get into a little bit of your background. Well, maybe let's go talk about what a NILO is, and what exactly the role of a Naval Intelligence Liaison Officer was in Vietnam broadly when you entered service.
Okay, I have a lot of detail on a lot of these things. I don't know if I go too far, but let me just start with it. Initially, when the Navy moved into Vietnam, it was advisors, mainly running up and down like the Mekong and around the coast to see, because there was coastal infiltration of weapons to the Viet Cong in South Vietnam with motorized trawlers that would beach. So anyway, that's kind of how the swift boats started. They were supposed to be coastal patrol boats around the perimeter of Vietnam. Some of them and other types of craft would go up and down, for instance, the Mekong, because they'd bring boats down the Mekong delivering weapons and so on. Well, what happened was around the time, maybe a year before Admiral Zumwalt took over, which was, I think, 68. I think it was early or mid 68. We had a Cambodian shop, which was sort of off by itself because nobody was supposed to be in Cambodia and so on. Paul Baker, who's also my age, he's a retired math and computer science professor in North Carolina now. Paul got stationed to the Cambodian shop. What he started to do was plot from the firefights, the Army and Navy firefights, where they captured a lot of weapons, and he started plotting them. And son of a gun, instead of just the rivers and so on, they found out that a ton of weapons was coming across the Cambodian-Vietnam border down toward the west end, toward the Gulf of Thailand, which turned out to be Military Region 3 for the North Vietnamese, which was the supply corridor for the Viet Cong in the Mekong Delta. So they started noticing this, but we weren't on the border then. We were supposed to stay 3 miles away or a mile away from the border and so on. So Zumwalt came in with his chief of staff for intelligence, Admiral Rick Tanis. He was Captain Rick Tanis then. And they said, you know what, we got to start patrolling differently here. So we had the PBR boats, the fast river patrol boats that were agile. Zumwalt reassigned them up to the Cambodian border because Paul's plotting showed that there was a lot of weaponry being infiltrated across what's called the Vinh Tay Canal, which is like maybe a kilometer, not quite a kilometer in from the Cambodian border, and the river that goes from the west end of the canal to the Gulf of Thailand. So they started sending, first of all, a guy named Mike Bernique, who's passed away now, was a swift boat driver. Interesting, his father was in the OSS in World War II. I knew him. He was before me, a year or so before me. They used to stop off at Ha Tien, where I was eventually stationed, but he decided to go up the Yangtang River and across to the Vinh Tay Canal. He got up the river and ran into Viet Cong tax collectors just standing there. Every Vietnamese boat that went by going to market, they'd tax them, either in money or take food or whatever they were carrying. And they all kind of like surprised each other. They're going, that's an American boat flying an American flag. They're not supposed to be here. And the Americans are going, my God, that guy's a Viet Cong, standing right there. They get into a firefight. It caused a big international problem the Russians complained to the International Control Commission. These Americans were starting firefights on the border. They're supposed to be, Cambodia is neutral. We're supposed to stay away from Cambodia and so on. So Zumwalt gets leaned on from Washington. What are you doing? What are you letting your guys doing all this crazy stuff up at the border? You're starting an international incident. Instead, Zumwalt calls Mike Bernique back to Saigon. Everybody thinks he's going to get court-martialed. You know what I mean? Zumwalt listens to him, and he says, I'm giving you a squadron of swift boats. Now we're going to start patrolling the entire Cambodian border because that's where they're bringing the weapons in. And so he gave Mike a Silver Star, and then Mike started patrolling all the way. You can go from the Gulf of Thailand up the Yangtze River, across the Vinte Canal to the Basak and Mekong rivers, and so on. So Navy started patrolling that. Wow. Immediately what happened was the River Division 532, which is the one that was there when I was there, they were the first ones out to the border. They sustained something like 54% casualties, which is unfortunate, but it also shows you've got a nerve. You know what I mean? You've hit them in a place that's really hurting them. So they had to be reconstituted. Also, the naval intelligence officers up to that point, to Zumwalt's point in Vietnam, had been what they referred to as SLJOs, shitty little job officers. They got assigned to riverine groups, which had like a lieutenant, running a bunch of boats. And all he cared about is, hey, listen, intel guy, I just want to know if we're going to get shot tonight. You know what I mean? That's all I want you to do. I don't care. Well, Zumwalt and Rick Tanis thought this was a waste of effort. So they went to the Office of Naval Intelligence, separate from the Navy, and got funded for a program, the NILO program that they started. And the whole idea was the NILO guys were actually technically Zumwalt's staff intelligence officers, but who were sent TAD, temporary duty, to wherever they needed them. And you know what I mean? When places got hot and so on. Anyway, that was the genesis of the NILO program. And the idea was first of all, they weren't responsible to the local guy who just didn't want his boat shot up. They were there to get broader to intelligence about where was infiltration happening, what was happening in Cambodia politics, and all this kind of stuff. So that's how the program was founded. That started in I think in '68 after Mike Bernique's encounter up there, and it continued actually right through the end of the war. I have a friend here in near San Diego, who was, I think, in the last class of NILOs to participate in Vietnam. So I'm sorry, that's a long story, but that's how the program came in. I didn't find out until when I started doing my own research for my book and for other things that this was funded. The NILOs were not funded like normal naval appropriations. They were funded by what was called the Naval Field Intelligence Organization Vietnam, and the XO, the second in command of N2 there, was the officer in charge basically of the Naval Field Intelligence Organization Vietnam. So it was interesting to me how this whole thing came about.
Introducing the BCM Stock Mod 3 and Marksman Risers. Built from years of real-world experience, the BCM Mod 3 stock is the next evolution in M4 accessories. Minimalist, snag-free, and just 6.4 ounces with double-walled H-beam construction for unmatched durability. Paired with the Mark III Marksman Risers in 0.5 and 0.8 inches. The Mod 3 offers total customization with 6 mounting positions and forward or reverse orientation. It delivers a consistent cheek weld for passive night vision or CQB. For high-ready weapons manipulation, it features a removable diamond textured butt pad, non-slip grip panels, and a quick adjust design with integrated sling attachment points. Plus, its patented internal latch system and ergonomic lever ensure rugged performance with tool-free installation. Proudly made in the USA, the BCM Mod 3 stock, built to outlast, and outperform. Get yours now at BravoCompanyUSA.com. Yeah, and your time there, I think you got something like 11 different medals. And before I get into some of that, I want to talk about an incident or ask you about an incident that happened in January of 68. So you got to Saigon, I believe, in December of 69, and then moved down closer to the Cambodian border after that. But in January of 1968, the USS Pueblo is taken off the coast of North Korea. And I'm asking this for a few reasons. One being that it plays into the book that I am currently working on right now, a work of fiction, but I like to call all my books fiction with whispers of truth. And so I'm doing some fact checking as I talk to you here about some of these things because I still have time to go make some edits to that part of the novel. But what happened with the USS Pueblo first off, and then I want to ask you a little bit more specifically about how that impacted Vietnam. So if you could run through that for people who aren't familiar with it or maybe remember USS Pueblo, something in the late 60s, and just go through what happened there in January of 1968.
Well, this ties into one of the points that I wanted to talk about here. Actually, my first tour was on the USS Providence, which was the 7th Fleet flagship running the everything but the air war. Actually, it was running the air war too, but it ran the whole operation, naval operation, out country, on the sea. Our yearbook has a picture of the USS Pueblo tied up right next to the Providence in Yokosuka, Japan, Christmas 1967, it must have been.
Yep.
Okay. They go up for their first, they had a change of command. The new CO came on. The old CO had decided he didn't, these were old intelligence ships. Because they were intelligence ships, they had thermite grenades on board in case they got captured, to destroy the crypto equipment and the pubs and things like that. The previous CO had taken the thermite grenades off the ship because he was afraid either by accident or on purpose somebody might drop one, make a hole in the hull, and sink the ship. Okay. So they go for their first cruise with the new CO, and they get captured by the North Vietnamese.
North Koreans.
Sorry?
North Koreans.
North Korea. I'm sorry. Yeah. Sorry, North Koreans. That whole thing, that had nothing to do with territorial violations. It had to do with the fact, got to step back now, the Russians had, do you remember the Walker brothers, the crypto guys?
Yes, I was going to ask you about that as well.
1967, they started selling codes to the Russians, okay? By the way, this wasn't discovered until 1984, all right? And I'll tell you that story too.
Yeah.
But anyway, what they had the codes, okay? They were getting the codes, and I don't know the details of how broadly, but I think it was very broadly. I had heard even with launch codes and, all this kind of stuff, but I don't know if that's true. Anyway, the reason to grab the Pueblo was, I think North Korea was paid a bounty to get the crypto equipment on board. They had the codes, but they didn't have the hardware, the crypto hardware. One of my pals here in La Jolla was in the Navy then too. He represented one of the lieutenants in that we had big investigative hearings here in San Diego, in Coronado, about the seizure of the Pueblo. And it turns out that they were unable to damage the equipment. I think one of the lieutenants grabbed a fire axe that they have in the Navy ships and banged on the cases trying to dent it, but they didn't have thermite grenades to destroy the crypto equipment. So they grabbed all like crypto equipment. I've heard from another naval intelligence guy that it was either flown out to Eastern Europe or Moscow. They're not sure where, but the idea was, okay, now we can duplicate the crypto equipment. So now this comes forward and I have to tell you, I mean, you're a SEAL, you know this stuff. I'm up there alone on the Cambodian border, which was pretty hairy. I just decided on my own, I'm not telling anybody about any of my operations. No, nobody, not American guys, not Vietnamese guys, not reporting over radio or, field telephone to Saigon. Because if I don't tell anybody and the mission's only in here, it's less likely I'm going to be compromised. And I found out that basically one guy alone can pretty much dart in and dart out of any place if nobody has any idea that you're coming. You know what I mean?
I do.
Okay. So anyway, and a lot of stuff was compromised. You've spoken to John Stryker Meyer about what even happened with the SOG stuff. Okay.
Yep.
That ties in then, I don't know if you remember in the book, the Khao Tun Sai Island.
Yep.
Going up there after I met Samut, who was the province governor and the regional military commander. After I met him and we became kind of blood brothers with exchange of pistols and everything, he said, next Wednesday, can you come up to meet me on Khao Tun Sai Island? I said, sure, sure. So the Seawolves flew me up there, dropped me off. I go in there, and what had happened is they had kicked out probably Russian communications intercept guys. I'm a ham radio guy since I was like 12 or 13. So I go up to the island. He lets me walk around. There's a tower there, a radio tower with UHF and VHF antennas on it. This is about 8 miles north of the Vietnam border.
And this is May 10th of 1970, right?
Yeah, May 10th of 1970, correct. And it's they're aimed at the LST offshore in Ha Tien, which was there we didn't have any comms, secure comms in Ha Tien. So any messages I sent, I had to put on a PBR that taxied out to the LST that had normal naval communications, secure communications. Well, clearly they were reading our comms. You know what I mean?
It turns out not so. Yeah,
they
not
were
so
reading
secure.
all our mail there. And then the kicker was, on top of everything else, well, first of all, I could see the industrial shelves where they had their radio equipment. The coaxial cable was Russian coaxial cable with Cyrillic writing on it and everything. And I went back and they had these little cottages the guys lived in. And then under a dust bunny, I found the masthead from a May 10th, 1970 Pravda newspaper articles. So, it's kind of intel guys on the way out.
Yeah.
We did,
May 5th. So they left 5 days earlier, right before you got there.
5 days. Correct. 5 days. Well,
that's wild.
They may have left even.
Oh yeah. Good point.
And then I thought too, that one of the reasons Samut wanted me to come up there in a week was because he didn't want to get into it with these guys. He wanted to be genteel in the way of asking, hey, look, naval intelligence guys are coming up here next week. You better get out of here in time or you're going to get captured and grabbed and all this sort of stuff. So that sort of encouraged them to hit the road. You know what I mean?
Jeez. And did you have any, you said you were doing missions without letting anybody else know. So were you aware that missions were being compromised more broadly throughout Vietnam? Is that why you took that route of just going up along the border without telling anybody what you were doing? Did you know things were getting compromised and just didn't know how?
No, not really. But it was just my own. I mean, you're a little tight when you go into that situation. This is the first time I'd been in naval intelligence. By the way, it was the job was independent duty, like a ship. I had my own communications designator. I had an administrative guy 60 miles away, but basically I reported directly to the staff and stuff. So anyway, I just left to my own devices. You know what I mean? I just thought, well, first of all, I don't want to get killed or captured. Secondly, how do you do that? If you think logically about it, if you tell anybody anything, once it's out of your head, you're subject to being compromised. You know what I mean? I just figured that out on my own. Turned out it was correct.
Turned out it was correct and much more broad than you possibly could have imagined back then, probably.
Well, right. And you remember it was a little later. I'm trying to think. Yeah, I think it was in June that I got sent on this big top secret mission to Sihanoukville, where the Chinese weapons were coming in, and that was what I had to go back to Saigon, which took me a day of travel basically to get briefed for this mission. So I do the thing. I get on the LST. We arrive. I get on the pier finally to go do my dealing, in civies and everything. And who pulls up but the two Cambodian naval officers that I had dealt with on the little ship when we did the weapons support deal for them to supply them weapons. And I'm going, how the hell do these guys know that I'm coming to Sihanoukville on a secret mission? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm just thinking, on this supposedly top secret thing from Saigon, somebody in the staff has leaked this information, at least to the Cambodians. You know what I mean? So that confirmed for me, keep it in your head, pal.
Yeah. And all right, hopping on to do a quick little video on my EDC. This is just going to be really about the pistol, which for a while now has just been this 365. And I absolutely love this pistol for quite a few reasons. One, it feels good in the hand, and that mag capacity, of course. So right here, this is the P365 by SIG, and I used to carry the Glock 43 before this, but then when this came out, I incorporated it into the pages of True Believer right here, and also started carrying this. So that mag capacity is really what did it for me. I still run the iron sights just because I have so much time running those, not as much time running a red dot. So until I put more time on the range on the red dot, there it is, the irons. So that is that. I don't always carry an extra mag. If I do, I don't have anything else in this pocket except that mag. So that's that. If I have the extra mag, it's in there with nothing else in that pocket. Also, if I'm leaving the house or even around the house, I always have this on me Snake Staff Systems tourniquet. So that is that. And then the holster for this, also been using this for quite some time. And this is the Black Point Tactical Mini Wing right there. Has the leather on the sides. And what I love about Black Point Tactical is that it says what it's for. So if you have more than one pistol, right here, this says that it's for the 6-hour P365 right there. So ammo right here. I've been running the 365 V-Crown here from SIG as well. So just as important as what you carry, of course, is getting that training. A lot of places you can go out there to get training these days. Of course, SIG Academy, there's Thunder Ranch, there's Gunsight. Mickey Shook at Carry Trainer travels around the country putting on classes and seminars. But get that training and stay safe out there. So tying that back to the Pueblo, so we have, I think Walker, naval warrant officer, first makes contact with the Soviets, I believe at their embassy in 1967. Pueblo gets taken in January of 68. All these missions begin to be compromised, perhaps even bombing missions, all sorts of essentially they had a front seat at the in the most secure rooms of the Pentagon with what the Soviets were able to do with the hardware from the Pueblo, and then the codes, the keying material, the information they were getting from Walker. And I believe, can you talk to me a little bit about Walker and the network that he put together between 1967 and 1984, 85, when it finally came to light? And then also, I believe his wife in 1971 tried to turn him in to the FBI, and they thought that I think she was a little tipsy when she went in or something like that, and they discounted it, which added another almost 15 years.
What I heard was just another pissed off ex-wife trying to get at her husband. That's how the FBI dismissed it.
Oh my goodness!
I don't know. All I know that Walker encouraged, was it his brother, I think, who was also a Crippy,
son, almost a daughter.
And I'm not aware of the extent of his network, but he had access to a lot of stuff, and he made his own little network there.
Yeah, that is true, and which compromised communications for all of those years. It's just incredible. And what I also was curious, what were you doing at the Article 32 hearings for the USS Pueblo in Coronado? Was that in a professional capacity with the military at that point, or were you in law school at the time, or what was that all about?
No. I was the Director 1 officer on Providence, and I ran a deck division. Providence was a flagship, and they used to switch flagships between First Fleet in San Diego and Seventh Fleet in Yokosuka. So I think it was around Thanksgiving of '68, we switched and came back to San Diego. Well, once we were in San Diego, we were doing training all the time, and they had a lot of training going on in Coronado. So we'd have to go regularly for gunfire training. They had this sort of mechanical trainer thing where you'd add and drop and, try to hit targets and everything. Well, I was a pretty good shot. And so I heard about these hearings. Everybody knew about the hearings. So when I'd go over there sometimes, I'd scoot out early and go to the hearings and attend them. Which was really fascinating. I wasn't a lawyer yet or anything, but I was very interested in what all had happened and why. And so that's how I got. Actually, I still have. I finally got a CD of all the transcripts of all the hearings in Coronado on the Pueblo.
That was big news at the time.
Oh, it was very big news. But I actually wanted since I'm a lawyer, I wanted the transcript, and I got 2 copies, and I gave some to my pal lawyer who represented one. He got the only lieutenant off in those Article 32 proceedings or whatever they were.
Wow.
Because he really was innocent. But anyway, I gave him a copy of the transcripts too.
Wow. That's amazing. We should say that one sailor was killed when the North Koreans took the USS Pueblo, and then the rest of the crew was released in December of 1968. So almost a year later, just shy of a year later, that they were in captivity that whole time, being questioned, being tortured, interrogated. Just a horrific experience for those guys. And so now jumping back to you, when you get to Vietnam, what is your initial assignment? First, you go to Saigon to a staff. Is that right? December of '69?
Yes. I got assigned to Admiral Zumwalt's intelligence staff, and I forget, it was N20 something or other, water mine warfare. And that was basically the Viet Cong would come down, float down with limpet mines or bombs and put them on any ships or big boats that were anchored out in like the Mekong River, and or ships in Da Nang Harbor too. There was a lot of supply that came into Da Nang. But anyway, it was like learning about water mine and the Russian triggers for the mine and stuff. But it just, let's just say it was easy to master, and it didn't very much interest me. And I said, I could be in a basement in Washington or Los Angeles doing this same stuff. That's not why I volunteered for naval intelligence. I also voluntarily participated in writing the Admiral's intelligence brief. We used to call it the Daily Bugle, with another guy Frank Vanderplo, who also I think is a lawyer in the Midwest now somewhere. And Frank was very good, and so I participated in that. So we'd get up at 4 a.m. and then read all the overnight intelligence reports from all over, summarize them for the Admiral, and so on. And what became obvious to me then was that this was going to be 1970 was going to be the year of Cambodia. There was just a lot of action up on the border, a lot of firefights, a lot of discovered weaponry. A lot of issues about weapons coming in through Sihanoukville by shipload and so on. And then I found out that the Ha Tien NILO post was coming up for rotation in, I think it was the beginning of February.
Of 70.
70. I'm trying to get the year straight. Yeah. February 70. So anyway, I started lobbying the guy that ran the NILO division. And long story short, what tipped the scales for him was I had worked for Captain Ed Hollyfield, who was the second CO of Providence, who was one of the best ship drivers in the Navy, who thought he was going to make Rear Admiral that year, and asked me to be his flag lieutenant, while I was still on Providence. Well, unfortunately, he got a brain tumor when I was supposed to be detached from Providence. I think he died in maybe January of 1970 in the Naval Hospital here in San Diego. So that didn't work out. But in the meantime, one of our trips was to Hawaii. We took guests along, and one of the SecNav guests turned out this admiral who was the reserve chief of naval intelligence. And he used to come up my 4 to 8 watch in the morning when we were steaming to Hawaii and talk to me and everything. And I had gone to Washington on my own nickel to see if I could get transferred to naval intelligence for my second half tour. We had a 3-year obligation back then. And of course both detailers who wrote the orders blew me off. You know what I mean? Yeah, kid, if you stay in for 3 years and ship over, then we can talk about this and everything. You're just a reserve, all this stuff. So I happened to tell this to the Admiral Barnes. And after a few days, he said to me, do you really want to be in naval intelligence? And I said, gulp, yeah. And he says, I shall send a signal. I always remember this. I shall send a signal to Admiral Sims, who's the chief of naval personnel that writes all the orders for everybody in the Navy. He was my roommate at Annapolis.
Oh, wow.
And I go, oh.
That'll do it.
10 days, I had orders to Admiral Zumwalt's intelligence staff.
That'll do it. Jump in the chain. That'll do it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, that's how I got out. That's how I got shifted over. I was told by my regular detail that my second 18 months would be on an LST taking toilet paper and toothpaste from Guam to Da Nang to deliver it. And especially for a ship driver, that's not something you're particularly interested in. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And you were only in Saigon you went back there at times, but you were there for a little over a month, maybe close to 2. What are your memories of Saigon at that time before you get down to Ha Tien?
It was not bad. It was hard to find a good place to eat. Mostly we ate at the hotel I was in was near an army mess, but it was real sort of generic, mystery meat with gravy kind of and preserved vegetables kind of food. Mm-hmm. There were a couple of nice places like the Rex Hotel and places like that had decent restaurants, but we didn't go very often. Usually, you had long days. I mean, we did the job seriously. You had long days, so you stay out. And I was married. I didn't mess around, or I didn't particularly like hanging out in bars and things like that. So I'd work a long day and then go get something to eat and then go back to my room. My roommate at the Liquidon Hotel was a SOG guy, as it turned out. That was my first encounter with SOG. He was a big guy, big blonde guy from Minnesota or something. I forget his name now, but he'd go out on these missions. He would never say anything. I mean, I think we spoke 3 words the whole time we were there. He'd go out, disappear for a week or 2 and come back, looking really haggard and, dirty and everything. And I thought, oh, that's what SOG does and so on. But that was my first exposure. And then I found out about SOG and the types of things that the guys would do. And I think that sort of lit a spark in me about, this is what you could do. I mean, maybe there's a separate group under orders, but kind of if you have the gumption, there's all kinds of stuff you can do and get away with. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and I think kind of lit the flame in me a little bit about this NILO job, especially if you're on independent duty and nobody's looking over your shoulder and you're not even in radio contact or anything.
That's the key.
Pretty much on your own, pal.
Yeah. That's the dream right there. Be as far away from the flagpole as possible with no comms. It's a little harder to do today with all the different comms that are options.
But by the way, I afterward, when the book came out, I was asked to lecture at the Office of Naval Intelligence in Suitland, Maryland. They have one of those, lecture bowls and everything. I don't know, there may be 17, 20 people in the bowl, officers, naval intelligence officers. And I told my whole NILO story and what I did. and they looked at me like deer in the headlights about, are you kidding me? You could get away with doing that stuff? You know what I mean? It's like with satellite communications now, nobody's got that freedom of action.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot more difficult today.
Field guys.
Yeah, a lot more difficult today. So you ate at the Rex Hotel. That's amazing. So there's the Rex, there's the Majestic, there's the Continental Palace Hotel. There's all these places where there were the journalists and spies and military officers and all sorts of people in this mix. What an amazing time to see that part of the world. Were the 5 o'clock follies still going on at that time?
Yeah, and I'm trying to think, was it the Peace Hotel?
The Briefings, I think, was it the Majestic? Anyway, or maybe the Rex. Anyway, one of those hotels, and they'd get up there every day and give their briefings. And
it was the 5th floor or something like their 7th floor. Yeah, I've been in that hotel, and I actually went to the room, where they used to do all that. That was going on. I never. With the job I had, I tried to stay independent and quiet. Keep your mouth shut. Don't even tell people what your job is. Interestingly, when I went back and research, you can find the names of the guys on staff, intelligence staff, the naval intelligence staff in Saigon. You can't find one of the names of the NILOs unless it's mentioned in a message, a naval message that one of them put out that was preserved or something. And then I said, well, geez, there weren't many of us, but you'd think there'd be some record. Then they thought, actually, that was good, because if they listed the names of the NILOs and who they were and where they were, that's just going to be leaked and you're subject to an assassination attempt or something. You know what I mean? Which happened actually to 1 or 2 of the NILOs.
Oh, wow. No kidding. As you have access to this intelligence network information, as you're reading through the intel reports in the morning to write those briefs, are you ever juxtaposing that with what you're hearing in on either television or in newspapers and saying, hey, there's a disparity here, or was that not something that you paid attention to back then?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, we didn't have any newspapers. You'd get maybe a week old, what's the Armed Forces newspaper?
Stars and Stripes?
Stars and Stripes, yeah. And it might have something about it. We didn't even have AFVN, Good Morning Vietnam, kind of stuff. We had nothing. We had nothing out there. It was really, I always said Ha Tien is like the Barstow of Vietnam. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's really pretty far out there. Later, though, I mean, especially after we got out of Vietnam and stuff, the biggest shock to me was getting back to the States, and everybody was informed about what we were doing, from Walter Cronkite, sort of, and what the public media was saying. And I'm going, well, wait a minute, I was there. That's not what happened. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, I do.
And so anyway, you can't argue with these people. I had one guy in law school tell me, well, I didn't go to Vietnam, but I know 4 or 5 people who were in Vietnam, and I know more about what was going on in Vietnam than you do, and Cambodia than you do. Okay, you want to argue with somebody about that? It's ridiculous,
Amazing. And it hasn't changed that much, by the way.
I just saw the other night on YouTube the Singapore's prime minister in English giving his speech about what's happening now in light of all the Trump trade stuff and everything. And he said, he's a very intellectual, and he said, people, this is a matter of dispute within the United States, but it's a fact that the U.S. presence in Vietnam for 10 years stymied the advance of communism in Southeast Asia. And he said it gave us all breathing room I can tell you, particularly in Singapore, to get our feet on the ground, to establish our economies, not to be fighting communist takeovers and all this kind of thing. I almost fell out of my seat. Anyway, I happen to agree with that. That, by the way, from the Navy standpoint, the reason we were in Cambodia and on the border and doing all this and going into Cambodia was to give everybody, Army, Navy, everybody, breathing room to withdraw from Vietnam for the turnover. Zumwalt did it fast. We were out of there by August 30th, just leaving advisors. And it took, I remember the briefing where General Abrams told all his commanders on the Saturday briefing, we got to get out now because of turnover. Zumwalt had a paper pad, and he just said, he had 2 pages, and he said, we'll be out by August 3rd. Navy will be out by August 30th. The Air Force guys got up with a dog and pony show and said it'll take us 7 years to get 6 or 7 years to withdraw because of all the turnover and all this kind of thing. And General Abrams said, you better go back and rethink this. You know what I mean?
Oh my goodness. And I think it worked. I think your operations did do that down there and gave that breathing room. And I believe in retrospect. Describe what was Ha Tien like at the time. You fly from Saigon down there. Do you take a helicopter? How do you get down there? And then what is the base like?
First of all, I had to fly through Canton, which is the Delta capital, the capital of the Mekong Delta. And we had a big base there, air base there. There I was supposed to catch a helo or a plane as close to Ha Tien as I could get. I missed my flight, and also they lost my sea bags going out there. So I stayed. The Army sergeant that ran the whole base, he said, "Come on, you're going to be here a day or so. Come on, you can bunk with me in my trailer, and come with me at night. I do patrol. You know, we have patrols all out around the base. We'll do the patrols." So I did that with him and everything, and then finally I got out. I don't know, it was a day or a day and a half later. And I'm trying to remember, it was a helo. It was like a hook, you know, we used to call it a hook. What is that? CH-47 or whatever. The big
one, yeah.
Cargo helos. And I flew out, and we had a helo pad actually at Ha Tien. We lived on a little peninsula that had a hill on it called Phao Dai. And we lived. The place we lived had been a French doctor's house that was bombed out somehow. The Army took it over, re-roofed it with corrugated metal, and put up like bamboo partitions. And so officers lived there. Well, it was actually the Army advisory team for Ha Tien. I forget what the number was. So there was a major. A captain who was the G2, and then usually one junior officer, like a first lieutenant or somebody like that on the team, and a sergeant. They had a sergeant that kind of ran the whole thing. When I first got there, the Navy was still living there because they had just moved the River Division, the PBRs, to Ha Tien from somewhere else. So there were 3 or 4 naval officers that lived there. So we lived on this hill. We shared the hill with a Vietnamese regional force, popular force militia company that had a captain, Vietnamese captain, who was totally squared away, Dai Huy Hung. He was. I think we actually gave him a Bronze Star. The Americans did, because he was so good in his operations there and protecting us, you know, on the hill, and so on. Then it was a little bit down into town. Ha Tien is an old town, and it basically came into existence with the Maku Chinese princes who came down there. And like any border town anywhere in the world, there's cross-border trade, and it's also the honky-tonk town where you go to blow off steam, and you know everything is available to you and things like that. And a lot of spice and tropical vegetables and fruit came across the border, and still did when I was there that year. It was a fishing village. The boats would go out at night, as they did about all the estuaries up and down the coast. And there were old French colonial buildings and a colonial pier. That's where the market was. We'd go down to the pier to buy shrimp and things like that. We had a nice old Vietnamese grandmother who was our cook at the team house and stuff, who was very sweet and very nice to us, and didn't quite get American cooking, but it was fine. We survived.
And what was happening in Cambodia and in Vietnam in 1970?
Well, Cambodia was definitely heating up. There was more and more contact on the river. By then, the River Division 532, we did not only day patrols, but night ambushes. Two boat patrols would go out on the Vinte Canal at places we had heard there were crossing points or that were physically logical crossing points to bring weapons across at night, to infiltrate weapons. So we'd have two boat patrols. We'd go nose into the north bank of the canal, which is the Cambodian side, and maybe the cover boat would go maybe a click up further, and then we wouldn't have any conversations, but we just do, click click, every hour one guy would click and the other guy'd go click click, and that just meant everything was a-okay, you know what I mean, rather than communicating and being on the air too long to be located. So that was pretty exciting. I actually, one of the chapters is about the first one I went out on. That was it's probably the most adrenaline I've ever had in my life.
Well, I would ask you specifically about that in a second, but who is there also? Do you have SEALs there? Brown Water Navy boats, the Sea Wolves, are they stationed nearby? Yes. Who do you have in that area?
First of all, remember I said there's an LST offshore for all our secure naval comms, but it was really there as the repair facility when the fiberglass boats got shot up. The PBRs particularly, they use their deck in the tank deck in the LSTs to do boat repairs and get them back in action again and return them to service. So they were just anchored out there. They'd have to get underway every once in a while to go resupply, but then they'd come back and anchor. Like I said, we'd send the Sea Wolves then were stationed on the LST to helicopter patrol. They were always there to be ready on scramble to protect if the boats got into firefights on the Cambodian border. And in fact, when we got shot at the Cambodian border, I didn't even call the Sea Wolves because I didn't want to take them away from their ready patrol for the boats out on the river and stuff. Instead, the major called it into Canto, and the Navy came out with Black Ponies, and then the Air Force, and then so on came out, and then Spooky and all, the big.
What was a Black Pony?
Oh, those are the Navy A-10s.
Oh, okay.
They had, I forget the name of those missiles. I'll forget them. But they have I think they were 200-pound missiles. Okay. The Sea Wolves had just the regular rocket pods, side, two 30 caliber door gunners. Okay. And then they had miniguns. The newer ones had the miniguns, the fast shooting miniguns.
Nice. And did you have SEALs there with you?
No, I didn't. But Phil Babb, I should tell it. Phil, I had to bury Phil with his family last year. The NILO that I relieved was named Phil Babb. He was a career Navy officer. He was probably 7 or 8 years older than I was. When I finally got to Ha Tien with no sea bags and the clothes that I had on for 3 days, then I think Phil literally gave me the shirt off his back and his pants because I had nothing else to wear until finally my sea bags caught up. But he had used the SEALs. Nui Dayung was the mountain, the limestone plug mountain right on the Cambodian border that was full of caves. That was the Viet Cong base for Ha Tien. The Ha Tien Peninsula is actually physically a part of Cambodia, but the border cuts it off. And so on the Cambodian side, talking about Sihanoukville, I could watch the trucks, the Hoc Lee trucks come down and unload weapons from the Cambodian side of Nui Dayung Mountain to supply the Viet Cong guys that were entrenched there and so on.
Wow. And what's happening strategically in in Cambodia with the government there at the time, and what is their relationship to North Vietnam and South Vietnam?
Well, as it turns out, apparently, I've talked to a lot of the SOG guys and Special Forces guys. Sihanouk he was Prince Sihanouk then, very popular leader amongst the Cambodian people and his royal family. What was going on was but I have to back up a little bit if I to tell you what's going on. The North Vietnamese had basically used northeastern Cambodia and the border area in Cambodia on the Cambodian side to run people and weapons down into Vietnam. Okay. Especially to the Delta and around the Saigon area. The deal, and I heard this from other higher naval intelligence people, the deal was there's nothing Sihanouk could do to keep the North Vietnamese army out. He had a tiny military force. They had the ninth biggest army in the world at that point. So, and his provinces, the Cambodian Northeast provinces, were very sparsely populated. So the deal was, okay, I'll let you guys come in and bivouac there, but you got to leave my hamlets and villages alone. Leave the people alone when you're doing whatever you're doing, coming south. And you have to buy rice from them, frankly, at an inflated price, at a slightly inflated price. So that was supposed to be the deal to allow them to stay there. Well, they moved in and they were actually, barracks buildings and all kinds of stuff. In spring of 1969, Sihanouk, because he was very popular with the people, would go out to the provinces to visit and so on. He went to visit the northeast provinces where the North Vietnamese were bivouacked. The North Vietnamese commander refused to let Sihanouk into his province because they had so much stuff there, Mm-hmm. I know Sihanouk's personal secretary, Julio Heldres. I think he's a Chilean that ended up working for Sihanouk. He's a professor at Monash University now in Australia.
Oh, wow.
And I met him after. I haven't met him in person, but we've corresponded a lot. That getting kept out of his own province really ticked off Sihanouk, and he realized that the North Vietnamese were getting out of control, and he had kind of lost it. He came back to Phnom Penh, and in July 1969, he cut off Chinese shipload weapons deliveries to the port of Sihanoukville, which was supplying the Mekong Delta and all the way up the Cambodian border to the Parrot's Beak and everything.
Okay.
And by the way, I'm sorry this gets discursive, but so anyway, Sihanouk knew he was kind of getting out of control. He knew General Lon Nol, who took over with Sariq Matak, who was the leader of the National Assembly and related to Sihanouk, actually. I think what happened is Lon Nol had been trained at the U.S. Army War College in the United States. He knew a bunch of Army generals that had come up, when he had come up in Cambodia and stuff. He used to hang out at the Special Forces base in Nha Trang. In fact, I know one of my SOG pals here in California knew that the month before the government turnover, the so-called coup, Lon Nol was in the Special Forces base in Nha Trang with his Praetorian Guard, the Khmer Kampuchea Krom guys, before the so-called coup on March 18th. But the attacks had been increasing along the border. The Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese had been shooting up Cambodian provinces along the border. Their military forces, they had scanty military forces there. And we're being aggressive against them. Okay, that's what was happening politically on the Cambodian side, because the NVA and the VC were getting more aggressive. So we should talk about the business of the weapons infiltration into Cambodia, Chinese weapons by shipload to Sihanoukville. Also, what was going on at the same time is Lon Nol's family, his wife particularly, and this guy named Hock Lee, who had a trucking company in Phnom Penh, had a deal. The Chinese weapons would come in. They would get half the weapons. Half the weapons would be then transported down roads that the United States built in the early 60s for Cambodia down to the Vietnamese border. Flat roads, no sweat, trucks can make it fast and everything, tarmac roads. And then they would dispose Hock Lee, Lon Nol's wife, and I think Lon Non, that's Lon Nol's brother, who was a Cambodian general also. They would somehow divvy up. I don't know whether they sold them to the Viet Cong or they sold them to somebody else or whatever, but they were making good business on there. Anyway, the whole thing had gotten out of control. So there was the so-called coup d'etat, when Sihanouk Matak and Lon Nol took over, while Sihanouk was away taking the waters in France or something like that for one of his normal trips. There's a good chance that whole thing was orchestrated to a certain extent, you know what I mean? Yeah. And Sihanouk wanted to be out of the picture, see what I mean? Because that kept his relationship with the Cambodian people. From what I understand, when the American Special Forces officers that had come up in the ranks that Lon Nol knew and had dealt with and continued to deal with had encouraged him for quite a while to do something in Cambodia, to come over, to get out of neutrality, come over to the American side and, bring them into the war. He declined for a number of reasons for many years, but it had gotten to the point that it was getting out of control with the North Vietnamese. And I think particularly for Sihanouk, the fact that these guys, the North Vietnamese commander, would not let him into his own provinces, you know what I mean? That was well beyond what the tacit agreement was. So anyway, then we got mortared at the border. It was March 3rd, I think. And by March, that triggered a whole bunch of protest events that were probably orchestrated. Lon Nol took over March 18th. Sihanouk was out of the country. There had been demonstrations in the border towns against the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese, again orchestrated, not against us for doing anything around the border, but against them. Lon Nol gave them 48 hours, I think, to get out of Cambodia, and they had riots at the Viet Cong and North Vietnamese embassies in Phnom Penh and all that sort of thing. So anyway, now the gloves were off, and now they're really going to be into it. Now don't forget, this is like March 18th. We didn't go in until April 30th for the incursion. So there's like about a 6-week period, 5 or 6 week period where the U.S. was on the fence about what they were going to do. I think really Secretary Kissinger was on a vacation. He had not had much vacation time, so Nixon didn't want to make a decision on it until Kissinger got back and all that sort of thing. But anyway, then the decision was made, and I think what precipitated it was the South Vietnamese army decided it was going into Cambodia, and that kind of precipitated our date of the Cambodian incursion, 30 days, 30 kilometers. I think it ended up going longer than that and deeper than that.
Interesting. And what was your first mission down there at Ha Tien? What was that like?
Well, I guess my first mission was riding with the PBRs on that night ambush on the Vinte Canal. I think coming back to, we used to regularly cross the border at Tan Han, Cambodia. There was a little market there. So we'd buy Cambodian flip-flops and net hammocks and, coconuts and things like that. So that was not much. But I did go out and we set sensors. Remember they had those sensors for ferrous metal,
I was going to ask you about those.
Weapons and so on. They had ones for, they could detect urine smell and things like that. So we planted a bunch of those up right near where the normal boarding crossing was near Tanhan. And it was a regular little path down through the tram there to get further into Vietnam and down.
And this is your first mission?
It was first or second. It was within the first, week or two. The big stuff that happened though was, in my view, I had to Shanghai helicopters. We sometimes I'd fly with the Seawolves, but we wanted to leave the Seawolves alone so they could rapid response for the boats if the boats were ambushed, which happened frequently. But the Army swing ship would come up once a week, so I talked to those pilots who I thought were teenagers. Actually, they seemed like, but they would fly me around Nui Dayung on the Cambodian side and stuff like that. And so we'd see, like they had Oerlikon AAA guns back there, at least one set of guns, which was good to know because they could do a lot of damage if somebody was flying close by. So we'd do visual reconnaissance whenever I could talk a helicopter pilot into flying around there. Then I think it was maybe now we're in May. I'm trying to remember. It was late April or early May. One of the Cambodian Navy corvettes came down close to our LST, and they started sending the NATO signal for send somebody to, talk. So the captain called me up and said, I think you should come out. I don't know what this is about, and so on. So I went over by myself to the Cambodian ship. For one of the reasons I got sent to Ha Tien is because I speak French fluently, and all the senior people in Vietnam and Cambodia had been educated in French at French lycées. They'd been to the French Naval Academy and the French Military Academy and so on. Well, anyway, long story short, I got on. It was a little awkward at first, but I think I put this in the book too. The XO, or in the captain's cabin, the XO went to get a bottle of soda and opened the bottle, and the thing broke off, and he cut his finger, and he said "merde," like shit, And I go, "Oh, you speak French, in French, you know what I mean?" So anyway, that's how we got on, was in French, and they had been sent down to make a formal request. Somehow, I guess I had met earlier Samut, who was the province chief for those two provinces. But anyway, they came down and they wanted to talk to me, and they had like a shopping list of weapons, 2,000 all kinds of weapons. The ostensible reason was they had 2 Marine battalions in Kep, in the hills of Kep, which is about 8 miles north of the border, that were besieged by North Vietnamese units down there. Nobody else had reported NVA guys down that far. But anyway, they were out of ammunition, eating rats and squirrels and stuff like that. So anyway, then I met with them. I came back. I sent the message out back to Admiral Zumwalt and the N2. And actually, they had a standard form where I sent it to all the other NILOs and the administrative officers. Immediately got a thing back saying, take everybody off all the CCs off your messages. You send them to Admiral Zumwalt, General Abrams, the U.S. ambassador, and the CIA station chief. This this is beyond our pay grade. This is going back to the White House Situation Room. So I did. And then what I never heard back formally was, yes, the weapons were delivered. But anyway, the weapons were in fact delivered. The way I found out later, the way they were delivered was we called the Indonesians, they call them man packs, it's a whole kit for one soldier. They sent the man packs of weapons to Cambodia, shipped them to Cambodia, flew them in, I think. Then South Vietnam replenished Indonesia with the same amount of supplies, and then the United States replenished South Vietnamese with the weapons that were sent to the Cambodia. This is back at the beginning, before there were actual invasions and stuff. So anyway, that's how the weapons were supplied. And I became actually good friends with the two naval officers, the captain and the XO of the Cambodian ship, who later showed up when I was sent to Sihanoukville and met me at the bottom of the pier. And I thought, I'm
on your top secret mission.
On my top secret mission.
Yeah.
And but as it turned out, it was very fruitful. They took me anywhere I wanted to go, took pictures of whatever I wanted, and all that sort of thing. But and then also I got underway on their ship to do naval gunfire against the North Vietnamese units that were encircling the Cambodian Marines at Kep. And so they chugged up. It was an old ship, and didn't go very fast and everything. Well, in the middle of all that, they get a call on the radio from the naval headquarters in Ream. Do you have this American lieutenant on board? And then they said, yeah, we do. Get him back down to Vietnam. We don't want him up there because I'm sure the summer before, I think it was the summer before, maybe 2 years, a SEAL platoon had been compromised. They went up the Mekong somewhere.
I was going to ask you about this because you're the only person I've heard this from.
Oh yeah. Well, it was in open source and everything. They were supposed to be doing a mission up there. The Cambodian army was waiting for them. There wasn't a firefight or anything, but they were taken into custody. They took them up to Phnom Penh and they paraded them around in vehicles and, parades and, we captured these Americans for violating our neutrality, and all this kind of stuff. And obviously the mission had been compromised. Do you know what I mean? So anyway, the U.S. and especially the Navy were very concerned. They didn't want Lieutenant Serra, grabbed as a thing. But I have to say, honestly, I'm sure you get a sixth sense about what's right and what works and what doesn't work and everything. And I trusted these guys. And also, I was helping them. They knew I was a friend. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I knew that wasn't going to happen. I was a naval gunfire guy myself, so we had nice discussions about that. But anyway, we turned around and chugged back down to, I think they took me to Antoy, to Phu Quoc Island, which is 60 miles off the coast, and dropped me off because they didn't like the idea of this guy wandering around by himself in Cambodia, even with the Cambodian Navy.
Right. What was the first time you came under fire? What was that? What did that feel like?
Well, every time we flew, and any time you flew, you got shot. You always wanted to get up to 1,000 feet because that was beyond most of the weaponry they had. You know what I mean? Unless they had real anti-aircraft type stuff. The first time we got shot at was March 3rd when I went out with the Army 525 military intelligence group guy, my pal Frank Brown. These were the serious intel guys that had worked in Germany against the KGB, and all this sort of stuff. We went out to the border to see something that we had gotten a secondary explosion from the Viet Cong compound on Nui Dai. And as we approached the border, they started to mortar us. We got off the road, stayed there. I had my radio. that really started our push back against Cambodia. The major that was the advisory team fellow called and said he said it was a tactical emergency because we had these two intel guys pinned down, Canto is far, like I said, Ha Tien's like the Barstow of Vietnam. It's way, way out there. So we stayed on the dike wall. I had my radio, and also I had done naval gunfire spotting and so on. So I knew how to call in fire, on a particular place. So I think the Black Ponies were the Navy Black Ponies were the first guys there. It was some time because they had to fly all the way across the Delta to get out to us. And then Air Force came, and then I think that night Spooky, the big C-47 or whatever it is with the C-130. 105 more. Yeah. And they had miniguns. They could put a round in every square foot with the miniguns. Yeah, so they had the place. Well, anyway, this went on. We finally I don't know, we were in the 7 or 8 hours in the ditch. And then we got out and went back. And then by then it was, by daylight, they had one of the spotter planes, the Piper Cub spotter planes come out, and they kept bombing the place for 2 weeks, 24 hours a day. And I thought, well, enough. I mean, there's only a few caves there and everything. They basically reshaped Nui Dayang Mountain, which was white limestone chalk. It ended up with white dust all over it. I think they killed everybody except those who were able to escape. And some of the Arvin guys with 155s howitzers came out and set up right at the Cambodian border, shooting at Nui Dayang. It was like shooting a barn. You know what I mean? Wow. It was so close and stuff. So that was probably the biggest time, besides getting shot at in flying.
Yeah. And what was your tactical level training as a naval intelligence officer? I think I read that you carried was it a Browning high power that you had without even a holster in it, just like stuck in the back of your pants or something like that?
Yep.
Well, where did you get that? And did you have any tactical level training before you started leaving the FOB?
Okay. First of all, I never went to NILO school. There was actually a NILO school in Coronado. I didn't do it. I went to one of the lectures when I was there, supposed to be doing gunfire.
Close enough.
And I thought, oh, this is pretty cool. This is a pretty cool job. But our training was the first thing. We got detached from the ship, took some leave, drove around the country, came back. The first thing was Vietnamese language school, which I think was 2 months. I think it was two or 3 months. I forget. No, it was September.
Okay. Up in Monterey?
No. Not the defense language school up there. This was just like a crash school for officers, So it was I think it was 2 or 3 months. I don't remember exactly. Then we got 3 days of weapons training at Camp Pendleton with the Marines.
Okay.
Where we were never allowed to shoot anything.
Just observe?
Yeah, it was just observe. You know what I mean? And then we went to SEER school, the survival school, survival escape,
evasion resistance escape,
resistance escape at Warner Springs.
Hey, same place I went.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah,
really? Yeah. And I think I did that it must have been in December. Yeah, because I was there for my birthday, which is December 3rd. I was in the POW camp there.
It can get cold out there. People don't think of
it snowed.
Wow, okay.
We were in fact, the last night we were there, I don't know if they still do it, but the bed frame, they were just wire bunk bed frames with the springs. You didn't have mattresses or anything. Everybody was shaking so much it was cold, and it was like all the springs were and the metal was bouncing around all night long because everybody was so cold and stuff. I wish I'd gone in the summer.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it changed a little bit since then. Then they gave us little concrete, this is post-Vietnam era, with the lessons of Vietnam. And so instead of having beds, once we got captured after the survival portion, then you get put in these little tiny, like concrete crates, essentially, where you're just in a little ball like this, and you're stuffed in there, essentially. Right. Yeah, so you're just stuffed in that thing like that. So it changed a little bit, but I remember it being cold out there because I must have gone in the, I don't know, late winter, early spring or something like that, and I remember it being a tad chilly out there.
Oh, it was definitely cold. I did escape from the camp though.
Oh, well done.
And they, and as it turned out, after you escaped, I think we were taking there used to be a can where you had to do your business, you know what I mean? And they'd take it out periodically. Well, they'd burn it with diesel fuel, and then you had to take it out and dump it somewhere. So I and another guy with a guard, an enemy guard, went out at night to dump the thing. And there was like a big, if you remember, when you came out of the camp, there was like a ravine there. And it was dark and everything. I just dropped my end and dove into the ravine. Unfortunately, it had broken concrete with rebar in it, and I still have a scar on my right ankle from it. But anyway, I escaped. They didn't find me. You go up the hill to the guard tower, and they give you a Wonder Bread sandwich with 2 pieces of Wonder Bread and a slice of Velveeta cheese in it, and a glass of milk. You know, you hadn't eaten all week, so that that was a big deal.
That was your reward for escaping?
Yes, that was your reward, right?
I don't know if we got a reward or not. Yeah, exactly. So ours was the same, similar. If you escaped, I think you had to like touch something on the fence or something like that it signifies that, hey, you could have escaped, and then you have to go right back. And I don't remember getting a reward though for doing that. I think me and one other guy did it when we had a chore to do similar to yours.
Right.
And then, but you have to like say escape. I forget exactly, but regardless, you're right back in the camp and right back into it until how did they end SEER school for you back in those days?
It was a Saturday morning. I think you had to come up and do quarters in the morning and stuff. They'd always fly the Viet Cong flag, and everything. And we got up, and we've had a whole week of this or whatever. And they started playing colors, the regular American colors, and flew the American flag instead of the Viet Cong flag. And I swear everybody was crying.
Yeah, it's so emotional.
It was unbelievable. That's how they finished.
Yeah, because there are very few things when you're in that camp that let you know from a sensory perspective that you're really in a fake camp. I mean, when you talked about the North Vietnamese flag being up there, the smells of the food, the language that's being spoken by the guards, like all of those sensory inputs are telling you that you are actually in a prison camp. The only thing that's telling you you're not is your own brain, because you know that you're not. You know this is made up, but every other sensory input is telling you that it's a real place. They do a really good job with that school. It's a very professionally run school.
And I thought it was useful. I mean, I don't, I wasn't captured and tortured and things like that, but it did give you more confidence of, now at least I have some idea of what to expect. I might get rewarded. I might get put in the little coffin box. I might be isolated from everybody. There's all kinds of things going on. And it was at least helpful. Let's put it that way.
Okay. Where did you acquire the Browning High Power? Where did you get that along your journey?
One of the Navy guys that had been out in Ha Tien for a long time told me that for Cambodians, it was an exchange of pistols was like the blood brother relationship of American Indians, you know. And anyway, after I met Samut, the governor, I think it was on Khao Tun Se Island, he gave me, the Cambodians all had new Browning High Powers, the officers. He gave me his Browning High Power, which I think the CIA guys captured, and we still had 45s or whatever else you had. And so I immediately went back. I think the first time I met him, I don't think I had a pistol. Went back and got my 45 and I gave it to him, which was sort of a status symbol for him too. But we became very good friends. And then what followed was, why don't you come out to Khao Tun Se Island? I got some things you'd like to see out there. So that worked very well.
Amazing. And I want to ask you about
By the way, I shot every week. I never had to use it on anybody, but I kept my proficiency up every week, and I still do, as a matter of fact.
Oh, fantastic! What are you shooting these days?
Now I've got a Sig Sauer P226.
Nice. Love it.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorites. That's what I wore the whole time I was in the military. So it was on my hip.
Wasn't it the official SEAL team weapon at some point?
It was the whole time I was in. Yeah. And I love that thing. I have quite a few of them these days, but I love it. It was on my hip every time I had to take my body armor off or my rifle off and go into a meeting somewhere, whether it was a U.S. meeting or the host nation force meeting or something like that, where we weren't supposed to be armed. I still had my SIG P226 right with me. So it has a near and dear to my heart, that pistol. So I love that you're shooting that.
I like the Brownings. The high powers that we had were the Belgian Brownings.
Okay.
Which excellent weapon. I mean, it was perfect for me, and it had a sort of a relatively small handle, and it worked well. I never had a problem with it. I shoot with some friends of mine. One fellow's a Finnish. In Finland, they all have to do military. So he's I only shoot with guys that are military trained shooters, you know what I mean? And we had another friend of ours who's a ham radio guy who was a State Department security guy. He had a whole collection of weapons from his family, and we were shooting down here in San Diego at the Discount Gun Mart where everybody shoots, you know. And he had a 45 from World War II, a SIG 45. And he said, "You want to shoot a 45?" And I said, I haven't shot a 45 since 1969. You know what I mean? I don't think I told you. As soon as I got the letter back that I had in 10 days that I had the orders to Saigon, at lunchtime, I immediately went off the ship. I went down to the armory. I got a 45. I got 2 boxes of 45 ammo. And I went to the range there, and I shot till my hand was black and blue. Figured I pretty much need to know how to use a hand weapon now. You know what I mean? From here on. But anyway, Ollie, our friend, had this 45, and he said, "You want to shoot it?" I said, "No." He said, "No, shoot it." I couldn't believe, our 45s had seldom been accurized or anything, so they were they'd rattle, if the service weapons. This SIG 45, I picked it up. I hadn't shot it in years, 30 years, right on the money. And I thought, this is unbelievable how tight this weapon is and stuff. I immediately, I had a CZ or something, then I immediately went in and traded it for the SIG 9mm 226.
I love it. I love it. I actually have a Browning high power waiting for me at the local gun store here because my protagonist in this next book that I'm writing, called Cry Havoc, about it's 1968 Vietnam, Mac VSOG, and so I have that pistol that he carries in the book. So I have one waiting for me that I need to go pick up probably today down at the gun store. I love that. And since we're talking gear, what else did you take with you on those missions? Did you have a med kit or anything on your first line gear? You had your Browning high power. What else did you have on you? What kind of watch were you wearing back then? Do you remember?
Oh, actually, I had a little Rolex that I got at the when we were in Japan, with a black face, and I just figured it was going to be taking a beating.
Nice. Do you remember how much it cost back then?
Oh, I don't know.
Probably like $100.
Yeah, I forget. It was nothing.
Yeah.
It was
Do you still have it?
No, somebody stole it when I lived downtown. But
it's heartbreaking to me.
Even with the roll, what I liked is you could screw down the crown to supposedly keep it empty. When I left Ha Tien tour, I took the watch to a Rolex repair place, and the guy fixed it, and he said, "Your watch was green inside." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "It had some kind of bacteria." But I was always very careful to tighten down the crown, and everything. Still, it was green inside. And he said it took him a long time to clean it all up. The only other thing I carried with me regularly was what's the knife company? Did
you carry like a Swiss Army knife or an old timer or
No. Who's
K-bar?
No, it's not a K-bar. It was a stainless steel. I got it in there. I can't remember. It's a big knife company.
Maybe send me a picture of it. Send me a picture of it when you dig it out. I'd love to see it.
It had a grip, walnut checkered grip on it,
Mm-hmm.
and mainly, and it was smaller than a K-bar. I never carried a K-bar with me or anything, but I wanted to have something like if I was in a helo and strapped in and we crashed, to cut the seatbelts, off so you could get out in time or something. Yeah. The only other thing I carried was a little notebook that big. The daughter of one of my best Providence friends sent me a sticker of the Vulture Squadron. It was a cartoon show that was on TV for a long time, and it's kind of a jokey thing. But anyway, I put that on it, and that was my little notebook, which I sent all my stuff to Texas Tech's virtual Vietnam archive.
Oh, wow.
That's where all Admiral Zumwalt's papers are. And I had a ton of books and materials and maps from writing the NILO book. At the beginning of COVID, I boxed all those up, and I sent a pallet load of 11 banker's boxes of materials from my NILO tour to Texas Tech, and they have all the stuff at Texas Tech now, including the book, including the little piece of paper I got from the Cambodian naval captain that had the shopping list of all the weaponry that they were asking the U.S. for.
Wow. Oh, that's amazing. This episode of the Danger Close podcast is brought to you by
Cry Havoc, from New York Times #1 best-selling author Jack Carr. Cry Havoc, a Tom Reese thriller. Order now.
Watch a Cry Havoc teaser here, or watch another episode of the podcast.